All right, and we are back. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. I am Jason Levine, today here with Andrew Scrivani. Wonderful to have you here, Andrew.
Great to be here.
And again, this is now part 2 of our 3-day Adobe Live event showcasing some amazing photography. And Andrew, we're going to work with some baked goods and some other things today, right?
Yeah, we got a few things out on the table. We're going to go over some lighting and see how we handle a daylight situation on day 1.
And a daylight situation that we actually created here in the studio.
Yeah, we're in a dark room in the depths of Adobe, and we were able to kind of create a situation here that really does a nice job of mimicking daylight and window light, and will. It's not going to be your classic studio setting, but it's going to be something that's going to be interesting to play with.
Now, just a quick question on that. So is it common for especially for shooting sort of food style photography, to shoot with daylight, or at least at that temperature? That's kind of where you want to be in general?
Yeah,
as a general
we
rule?
definitely in food photography have moved into daylight more often than not. And then in the absence of daylight, we have tried very hard to recreate it in different ways. And usually that starts with a color temperature in the 45 to 5500 Kelvin range, and if not, there's always software.
That's
Hey,
yes, which we're going to be using a bit of today as well.
Sure.
All right, so I thought maybe we could start just by kind of showcasing some of your work, let people see sort of the kinds of things you do.
Of course.
And you can, of course, this is right on your site here, andrewscrivani.com. And if you want, you can drive here with my slightly, again, older MacBook, slightly interesting touchpad here. But
these arrows probably work. No?
Oh, that's fine, yeah.
Oh, or not.
Or maybe not.
That's okay. Well, I mean, the picture here that's sort of this primary picture with the drinks is a daylight shot, backlit. And it's a very common technique that I use, and I'm going to go over a little bit here. Obviously, you can see where my light source is coming from. And this sort of dark to light look is going to be consistent throughout my work, especially my daylight work. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to create that and what's the benefit of using daylight for food, for sure.
I know a lot of people are going to ask, too, like the gear that you use, what you shoot with. So Lita and Wade were just using, they're a Sony in the Sony family. You're a Canon.
I am.
Okay.
I'm Canon. I've always been. I use other camera systems for other applications, but for the most part, when I shoot food, I really like the color profile on the sensor for the Canon cameras, both in stills and in motion.
Right.
And I think that up to a certain point with motion projects, until we get into really big movie cameras, using the Canon the Canon hardware with the really nice color profiles that are tweakable.
Yeah, that's right.
A little tweakable.
That's right. Oh, we got a lot of people saying hello. Say hey from
Hey.
Armas. Usa, very nice to see you. Danielle, great to see you. Ebeen Flash. Yeah, so of course we've got our interactive live chat here. So in just a few moments after we take a look at some more photos, I will be playing the role of Andrew's assistant.
Hey, all right.
All right. As we're tethering into Lightroom, and but of course we will have the chat rolling. So feel free to ask all of your questions. Oh, someone said, Evil Cerise is saying, can you fangirl for a second? My God, those greens are rich and deep. Love it.
Yeah, well, that's that Canon, the combination of that Canon software in the camera, and then how we post produce.
Yeah.
Can we go back for a second to this picture?
Yeah.
So this is not a daylight technique. This is a strobe technique that I will show on day 2.
Okay.
So we'll be working and showing a little bit about how I kind of try to recreate the style, but with a little bit different. And I know that Lita was talking about this in her session, was the idea of depth of field.
Right. She shoots everything at f/22.
Yeah, f/22. Right. And I shoot everything at f4.
Right, I was going to say, you're probably f4, f2.8 if I had to guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Lightroom, send Photoshop, Helen.
That's right. Yep, we'll be doing a bit of that.
Yep. But yeah, I want to go over that, and then we'll also talk about on day 3 a little bit about how to use steady lighting and being able to transition from using a still camera to using a video camera, which is also sort of what they were talking about in the last session.
Right.
Is this the ease of use of switching back and forth, and a lot of photographers are being asked to do those things now. So it's absolutely.
And for that, you're shooting with a C100, right? You mentioned before. You sometimes shoot with a C100.
Sometimes I use my Mark IV. Sometimes I use a C100. There's a couple other cameras I use, but for the ease of use, kind of lighter, heavy, or lighter weight.
Yeah.
It's those cameras really work great, and then of course we can use our lenses that we're comfortable with.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the
So these are beautiful, but they're also making me very, very hungry.
It's getting close to lunchtime.
I hope all of the bakery goods last the entire shoot because
they usually don't.
Do you often sample them in between?
Yeah, usually you pick your heroes.
Right.
And once the heroes are picked, the cast-offs end up suffering a much different fate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right.
End up in my belly.
That's right, in your belly, right. God, these are just fantastic here. And obviously more shallow depth of field with some of these. And I imagine for different, wow, that's fantastic too. Oh, we have the entrees, we've got the desserts, we've got everything here.
I used to break my website up that way.
Oh, right, of course.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Good. Yeah,
dessert, drinks.
It keeps them on the site and it keeps them hungry for your work. Oh, these are fantastic. Really beautiful.
This is when I star in my own pictures.
Very nice. Oh, yeah, right.
That's wonderful having a timer and
that's right.
So
there's a good question for.
Oh, we got all kinds of questions going.
Anton.
Yes. Oh, yes. So, yeah. Do you so shooting with a tripod? Do you shoot in busy restaurants, off hours? Are these staged, I guess, or how is it often done?
I mean, in the beginning of my career, I did shoot in restaurants. It's not something I kind of do very often now, and when I do, I will insist that we close down, and I'm able to kind of have run of the show. It's not often that photographers get that opportunity, but the fact that I'm kind of primarily known as a studio photographer now, that is sort of my prerequisite. I need to have control.
I was going to say, total control, yeah.
Well, if you're hiring me to do this,
right,
it has to be under a certain conditions, and that's not going to happen in a busy restaurant while you're fighting with the chef. Yeah, and then I shoot with a camera stand, which I will demonstrate here today. Not necessarily a tripod, but there are tripod solutions to what I do for, if you don't have, the wherewithal to buy a $20,000 camera stand.
Right, because we're going to be able to sort of dolly up and down here, and you can tell in these photos, right, you're not just standing above.
No. I mean, and look, I like every other food photographer on the planet, has stood on the dining room chair to get over the plate. But after falling off the ladder a few times, that probably convinced me that it was much safer and more cost-effective to buy the equipment necessary.
Right. Someone was asking, too, any particular lenses that you shoot with, or one lens that you sort of...
Yeah, I mean, I use primarily shoot with a 50mm macro lens. I have a number of them that are made by different producers. So I use the Canon one, which is out of production right now. It's not a particularly sophisticated lens. It makes all kinds of noise. It's very... old school, but it's a great looking lens.
It's beautiful, right?
And then I have the Zeiss 50mm macro, which is a much more kind of intense piece of glass.
Right. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. Oh my God, look at this.
This one has had a life of its own.
I imagine.
For many years, it's become a sort of a signature shot for me.
So something like this, I mean, is it sort of like, okay, puncture the poached egg? And are you doing sort of bursts here? Or
well, basically the camera would be on the stand. Yeah. We're focused right here. Right. And it's sort of like, okay, ready, set, poke.
Right.
And then you look in editing and you go, yes!
There we got it, drizzling all the way down.
Nobody sees the other 90 pictures that we took
that
didn't look like that.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah, so this kind of drop off to black look is something that I do very often. I started doing it a few years back when nobody was really shooting this sort of moody look. It was still very light and bright, Martha Stewart-esque kind of food approach, and it didn't appeal to me. And this was something that did, and the way the colors in food really pop out of black was so. This has sort of become my signature style, and has been for quite a while.
And there's a definite signature here too, and not only in lighting, but also, I mean, someone was just mentioning sort of, nice rule of thirds here, and it really feels, and also, again, varying that sort of shallow depth of field, really
I think it's evolved over the years with the technology. We've had this kind of transition into digital where shooting in a shallow depth of field was a necessity because we couldn't push the cameras past a certain ISO without the image breaking up. Now we have all this freedom where you can push the camera as hard as you want and you still get as much depth of field as you need.
So that brings to mind too, because you were mentioning using sort of the stock picture styles, which are of course editable, non-destructive. How much of what, and they'll see this in a moment when we're tethering.
Yeah, sure.
How much of what you shoot sort of becomes the final? In other words, are you doing a lot of processing generally, or does it? I imagine it varies.
Well, it does vary, but because I got my break with the New York Times, we didn't have the opportunity to do post-production. Photoshop was a dirty word. Because of editorial honesty and everything else. And that extended to everything. So they just threw one big blanket over everything because we don't want news pictures edited.
Right. I remember when this was the thing, when this happened actually, and this was stated that was sort of their, that was specific actually to the New York Times at that time, right?
Absolutely.
Like that was their whole
And it was,
mantra.
and because I did the volume of my work early on, I learned how to do pretty much everything in camera and on set. And then my post-production kind of is a light touch.
Yeah.
It's a gloss.
Yeah.
So
and
I'll go over the kind of process I go through. And of course, how we shoot to color profiles and how we shoot to the camera settings really matters in what we're going to do after the fact. And that came with time too.
Right.
That came.
And I imagine, especially like with something like this,
you
kind of see what you have it in your head, sort of how the final is going to look as it's going through the lens to some degree.
Absolutely.
Right?
Once you've done it over a number of years and you get your lighting technique down and you get your process down and how your post-production looks, when it looks this way in your camera, it's going to look that way once it's done.
Once it's done.
So,
And Anton's asking how you did the top-down shots. Are you suspended from the ceiling? And yes, we're going to
Well, I kind of do the Tom Cruise thing from Mission Impossible. I have that rigged into the ceiling of my studio.
We do have that here, if need be.
I'm looking forward to that.
Got the truss and everything ready for you.
Excellent,
Like
It's a little, it chafes a little, but it's all good.
We have to increase our insurance. Israel is asking, how do you manage to shoot with so much smoke? Oh yeah, this picture of the fillet here, or the sirloin.
Well, there's a technique that I'll show in general. The way I light food in general is this kind of side light, kind of raking light that goes across, and what that does, and you notice this when you work in commercial work, when you're working with big crews, is that they actually set up lights to mimic that very thing where they call it a smoke light, where the light is just streaking through the smoke coming up out of whatever you're doing. So this is basically picking up all of that raking light that's coming across, and it's a natural way to do something that a lot of times it takes 5 guys and a holding 5 different pieces of equipment to make the same shot.
Right. And I have to imagine too, again, this is with technique and over time, really finding that focal point, because you're shooting fairly shallow here as well. You're shooting through smoke, or steam rather. Is there a lot of sort of trial and error when you're kind of doing a shot like this to get, to really focus on where your eye should go first, so you see that?
I think so. And I also, do something that some people told me was unusual when I started working on bigger jobs with more people around me. Because, when you first start, you're just kind of doing it on your own.
Right.
And when I got involved in bigger projects, there were, it's all edible food.
Yeah, a couple of people asked that.
None of it goes to waste.
Right.
When I first started working with bigger crews, people said, you're really unusual as a shooter, because I will get the camera on my face and then just start stalking with the camera in my, looking through the viewfinder to find that spectral highlight or to find the angle I want. And then once I'm there, I'll shoot freehand.
Okay.
And I shoot a lot of freehand.
So you do shoot a lot of freehand
Oh,
still.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I still shoot a lot of freehand, and mostly the table down look is on the camera stand.
Right.
But everything else, I tend, unless it's a timed exposure or something I have to do like that egg shot, everything else is kind of freehand.
Oh, okay. That's pretty awesome. All right, what else have we got here? Do you direct your clients on what to do and where to cook?
It depends on the client, obviously, but yes, because cooking food for like a restaurant or cooking food for your friends and family at home is different than cooking food for the camera. And you have to explain that to people sometimes in a client relationship, and they understand that. The idea is that we're trying to make the food look hyper real.
Right.
That's my job. It's still real, but it has to be its best form of real.
And I think that's why so many people are asking, is it real food, or are you using props?
No, it's all real.
Do you ever use?
No.
Why
I don't
would
use
you?
anything inedible in my work. It's sort of more than just style. It's also a preference personally, because I feel like, food's an important thing. and we need to respect it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't want to throw food away. I want people to enjoy it.
And here's that again with that black on black silhouette. I mean, it just pops so much.
Yeah, and this is strobe, and this is why it's so crisp.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's the lighting on that is just it's really intense and knocked down considerably with filters.
Right.
But it's a pretty intense, even light.
And with a shot like this, because you're having to use so much intense, even light, and you mentioned this when we were talking before, are you still kind of shooting slightly underexposed here?
Always.
Yeah, always, yeah.
Yeah, with digital, it's always better to shoot slightly under anyway, because as soon as your whites are gone, they're gone, and that's it. You're not getting them back.
Can't say that enough. I know we've talked about that a lot on the live streams. Right. Always shoot slightly underexposed. Overexposed, never your friend. Or seldom, anyway. How do you choose backgrounds? Is it stylist part? I think you said that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a prop stylist. I have propped my own jobs for a very long time. I have a huge prop collection of my own. Mm-hmm. So the propping is part of the style, my personal style, and how I present photographs. So how food is presented and what it's presented on are all part of it. I mean, I've gone on record in a number of different venues saying I feel that food photography is a collaboration of 3 artists, a food stylist, a prop stylist, and a photographer.
Right.
And I think that it's an art within an art within an art kind of thing.
Right. Oh, it's hard to look at. We're approaching lunchtime. I'm salivating. Is it weird?
No, that's a very flattering.
Yeah.
It's a flattering reaction.
And those row. Oh my God. So someone was just asking, and this is actually a great question. So now obviously you're shooting with a Mark IV here.
Mark IV, yeah.
So full frame sensor. Someone's asking, can I still shoot food photography with a crop sensor?
Of course, you could shoot with anything you have. I mean,
right.
I've been very firm about this whole idea of it's the photographer, not the equipment.
Right.
I take pictures with my iPhone that sometimes and post on Instagram, and people are like, "How did you do that with your iPhone?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, it's the lighting, not the camera.
Right.
So if you get the lighting, like the way I set up my shooting table." It doesn't matter what I stand over that table with,
right?
Because the lighting is already perfect.
Right.
So that's really a big part of it. Man, it's fast and furious here.
It feels like not fair to see this mid-afternoon. I know. Try being here. And we have real food over there, which, as we said earlier, might not make it through the entire shoot.
I want to talk about this camera settings question because I heard our earlier Anton's people talking about that and
people always want to, this is kind of your secret sauce too, a little bit of that.
Well, I mean, my camera settings will differ between what kind of lighting techniques, but if you're talking about a pouring shot, you need to be at least 125th of a second if you're shooting without strobes.
Right.
And if you're shooting strobes, you shoot as high as you can until it doesn't sync any longer.
Right.
That's really all about whether or not your camera will sync at a much higher shutter speed.
Yeah.
So if it's I know this camera syncs at 200, so that's where I would be to shoot liquids. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's something that I think still everyone's saying amazing. I'm hungry, but yeah, shooting liquid, shooting water. These are things I think that's kind of when people attempt these sort of things. That's one of the first go-tos. You know, water droplets and ripples in the water and this kind of stuff. Okay.
Well, really, with iPhone? Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and you said it, and I think that's something that people can truly embrace. What's the best camera? The one that you have.
The one you got on you.
The one you got on you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost cliche now, but it's true. And with especially the 7.
Wow, man, the camera's so good.
It's so good. Right?
I mean, they're putting the point and shoot market out of business with the phone cameras. Right. I mean, they're so good in low light and. You could do really cool stuff with them.
And you mentioned that earlier, and that's actually a great point, is that's so true now. I mean, I can remember maybe a little more than 5 years ago, but let's say 5 to 6 years ago, before I was always carrying a DSLR, because that's kind of my take around, right? In my case, Nikon. I always had some kind of small, it was like an Olympus or something, or like a little pocket camera, the Canon Power Shots. Always had those, because the phone cameras were, Yeah, share it with your family.
Now, I mean, even when I'm on vacation, I do carry around a little Fuji. It's
XT10.
Yeah, exactly. I carry one of those around.
There you go.
But
I was asking about that.
Yeah, but when the battery is run down and I don't feel like carrying it anymore, I just whip out the phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, last couple questions before we actually because we got to get to it. Someone's asking, do your clients deliver the food to your studio?
No. Unless it's a packaged food company, like, or something on a commercial level where
like Omaha Steaks or something.
Yeah, well,
like
exactly.
That. Yeah.
Well, like we've done these frozen food jobs or whatever, where they ship them in refrigerators.
Right, dry ice.
Everything comes.
Whatever, yeah.
But for the most part, our stylists will shop for the food.
Right.
We create the food from scratch.
Right.
And where you shop matters. To get like this meat. I mean, you gotta know your butcher that is going to be able to do that scoring, or if your stylist can do that scoring, or you have somebody who could decorate a cake really well.
Yeah.
All of those things matter, and when we work with stylists, they want to start from scratch because they want to pick the palette, right? They want to pick their tools.
Right.
So,
all right.
No, you cannot use a zoom lens to do food photography. All right, there, I've said it.
That was asked a couple times. Perfect. Yeah.
I tell you why. I think prime lenses in particular are going to be sharper, crisper.
Yep.
And also the idea of lens aberration and barreling. You really just want a clean frame that you can, and learn to work with one frame.
Right.
Learn to hold a frame. You get a 50 millimeter frame and master that 50 millimeter frame, and then you don't really need a zoom lens.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great advice too.
Sure.
Okay, so I think it is now time.
It is time to enter the studio.
All
right,
so
cool.
we're gonna take it from the desktop. We've got all the machines already set up.
Yep.
And let's do it.
Off we go.
All right, we're hungry.
Yep. All right, here we go.
All right. Do you need water or anything? Are you?
No, I'm okay for now.
You're okay.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm good.
Handy. Just in case.
So, what I've done here is kind of set up a situation that looks an awful lot like our studio back in the East Village. Now, this window to my right we created this situation for this particular application, but we're going to treat this as if this is sunlight coming through the window. So it's the right color temperature. I've already done a test on it. It looks really great. And I want to show you how to both use this daylight in a window situation and also how to modify this light for food photography. Now, I was pleasantly surprised that when I set these lights up and they started streaming through this window and I took out my light meter and I clicked it and I said, wow, this is spot on. 400 ISO, 4.5 at 125th of a second. All I need to do now is take out my camera and shoot. And that's absolutely true. Let me get this. For those of you wondering, in digital world, this is what you want.
That's right.
This is a light meter.
Light meter, the
This
real one, not the app.
This one's older than my kid.
Right. Well, I was gonna say that's a classic Minolta. Yeah.
Yeah, this
nice.
is old, man. This is 20 years old.
All right, let's get a close up on that.
Yeah. So
Old school. You can
this
find
is
them on eBay, I'm sure.
old school. Really cool. And my settings are right on there. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
For all of you asking that question, there it is. Take a screen grab.
Nice.
And there it is. 125th of a second is where I like to be so that I don't get a lot of camera shake. I don't have super steady hands. I know some people could shoot at different. Some people could shoot at very different lower shutter speeds and be very comfortable there. But I like to move around the table and handhold the camera. So 125th of a second is sort of where I'd like to be really comfortable. 4 to 4.5 for table level shots when I'm kind of down here, and that's where we're going to start. So I'm not gonna bombard you with information right off the bat. So we're going to take it one at a time here. I want to go through some of the equipment I have on hand. I started with this guy, our light meter. Look, it's absolutely true that you can just take a test shot and organize from there. But because the back of the screen isn't always really consistent, and sometimes it will... I'll get that. It's okay. I went to sleep on us.
Yeah, live logging in.
Yeah, we go. Live. Yeah, you didn't see that, right? Nobody saw that. What was I saying? Somebody remind me.
Light meter.
Yes. So, you using a light meter will help you get a true reading on the light so that you're not relying on the screen, because then sometimes you take those pictures and you go back to your computer and you're like, oh my God, it's so overexposed or so underexposed because you didn't calibrate the back of your camera.
Right.
And then that becomes problematic. So I would say always trust a light meter, or even if you have the wherewithal, get a color light meter,
Right.
even better.
Right.
Because it'll tell you what you need. So, okay, some of the other equipment that I want to talk about. I mentioned that 50 millimeter macro lens.
Yeah, oh,
this
there
is
it
it.
is.
Out of production right now by Canon. It makes all kinds of noise. I don't know if you can hear that.
Oh, yeah.
But it makes all kinds of noise going in and out. But honestly, this has been my kind of bread and butter lens for a really long time. Sometimes I could do a job with just this lens, but I'm going to actually show you another lens. I'm also going to show you some of the other stuff in my bag that maybe people don't think about a lot of times. And things like this is called a lens wrap. So even though your camera bag is padded, when you spend money on lensing, you really want to protect it as well as you can. So having these little things are not that expensive, and you kind of have that. And that's my 100 millimeter macro. So I shoot pretty much macro exclusively for food. Very rarely, unless I'm kind of doing those top-down shots where I have at least 3 or 4 feet to work with. Right. I use macro lenses because of two things: is the nature of the drop-off of the depth of field, and also the idea that you're able to fill up the frame with the food.
Right.
And I have a shot on my Instagram feed if you want to look at it right now. It's of a raspberry, which is about the size of my thumb.
Right.
That it looks like it is the size of a house.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And speaking of the top down, so this is the rig that we have.
Yep.
For that
This is the piece of equipment I wanted to talk about. This is a camera stand. This is the one I have in my studio. This is called.
It's very heavy.
It's very heavy.
Michael and I know this directly.
It is called a FOBA stand. They're also made by other companies, but this one is FOBA.
We were using an F word yesterday too. That's
Yes.
funny. Yeah. Or is that a PH? Right.
Yes.
Right. I don't know, whichever.
So there's a series of dials on this thing that'll let this go up and down. We have a camera head right here, so the camera will mount. I'm not going to do this first,
Right,
but I
yeah.
will show you how it works. So once you've mounted your camera in here, lock it in, and then it's very simple to just drop this ball head down for the top down shot. And then you wheel this over to your table and position it right over, and then you can go up or down as you need to.
Oh, fantastic.
And then in or out with these dials.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the ability to use this as a tripod for a table level shot. But for the most part, the way I use this is just the way I just showed you. And we'll demonstrate that later.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go over a couple other things first.
All right.
So, take that off. So when you're putting these things together in a studio setting, and maybe this is repetitive for some people, but I really feel it's important to kind of go over things like use a roll of gaffer's tape and get all your wires taped down, get things out of your way so that you have like kind of free reign to your area. So before I got started here today, I came in and I kind of cleared out my area in the way I wanted it. I put the equipment in the same exact positions I work in my studio because I need to be in that kind of comfort zone where I'm turning and moving my body in the way that I always do. So my light is always coming in a certain way. My camera stand is in the same position. So this is very familiar to me, even though I'm in an odd place. So.
And you don't have your usual sort of table or backdrop here. This is just one of our tables that was just lying
so
around
I mean,
here.
we're not propping this out like a job. We don't have a tremendous amount. We don't have a food stylist here, unless Michael. Did you bring your apron? No.
What do you want?
An apron, yes, an apron.
Yeah, we don't have a food stylist here. We don't have a prop stylist here. This is raw. We're going straight up with exactly kind of how I set up technique-wise.
Right.
So. Do we want to answer a few questions before I get started in case I'm going a little too fast?
No, I think you got to them actually. They were really asking about the gear and that and some of the classic stuff that you're doing.
This is the Mission Impossible stuff.
Mission Impossible stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the first thing I'm going to do is a table level shot. So typically what I do is I take my camera stand and I get it out of the way because I will walk into it and bang my head or do something insane like that.
Good advice.
Right. So we have a couple of little things here. Now, I want to discuss this light. So this is, when you talk about food photography lighting, what you want is the biggest light source you can create. So obviously in the real world, that's the sun, right? And then what we want to do is filter that light to a place where it doesn't create highlights that are too blown out, or shadows that are too deep. Now this window wall, luckily enough, has already got a frosting on it.
Frosty and diffused, right?
Yeah, so it's sort of like having like an opalescent kind of filter, which is like this, which is exactly what I have in my studio. I have one that's crafted to the window size, and it fits right in the window. And then I have others that kind of are on Velcro, and I stick them in the window.
Right.
So I can change them out and get different diffusion. And depending on how thick this material is, it'll either knock down the stop from a third all the way to a full stop.
Right. Okay.
So this will, and when I say stop, I mean aperture.
Yeah.
So I know that sometimes we start talking photo speak. And,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they're loving it though. Very pro. Very.
All right,
pro.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a monster. It's a monster.
It's alive.
It's alive.
It is real. Yes.
Right. Okay. So we have a few little things here to start with, and I'm gonna do something which I always end up having is something like this.
This was a specific request, right? Yeah.
I shoot on these things all the time because they add texture.
Right.
Sometimes they're old and a little bit beat up, and that's intentional in food photography because you want to try to limit the amount of spectral highlights on your propping because you want to highlight them in your food.
Right.
So that matte plates, matte, things that aren't shiny in silverware or glassware, anything that has sort of a softer edge to it, and these things where they're a little worn or bake pans that have been or fry pans that have been in the oven way too many times.
Right.
All of that provides texture, patina.
It works, right?
It really works.
You don't
with
need
food.
it clean and pristine per se. Maybe you probably don't necessarily. Want
You don't because you want it to feel real. This is about emotional connection to real food, right? And if you want to do food photography, as far as the way I do it, it would be to make it feel like it just came out of your mom's kitchen or my grandmother's kitchen.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I don't want to mess with people.
That's right. No.
Okay.
All right.
So like here, because the things here I have on this plate are a little flatter, so I'm going to save these for now, and I'm going to try these from the overhead. Okay.
Yeah.
And these little guys that I have here are really tiny, but they have architecture. Right. So shooting them at table level will give us a better opportunity to exploit that and fill up our frame. So I'm going to put a couple of these on here, and then I'll talk about the way the light kind of plays off these things. I talked about this a little bit, where the light, my primary lighting technique is side lighting.
Right.
So I have my light here on my right, and it's raking across my table.
Right.
It's creating a light to dark dynamic.
Right.
So this would be the primary way I would shoot food. Although not the only way.
Right.
And it works either at table level or from the top. Because you're still creating this kind of wash of light, and it feels normal. It feels natural for food.
Kind of feels like it's sitting in the kitchen window type thing, or that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing, and it also kind of lends itself to the way you see food in the real world. Right. So if I'm sitting at a table, I don't see it in perfectly lit strobe lighting. I see it in probably daylight or kitchen light, which is what we try to emulate.
Or part of it fades into shadow or fades into the background.
Exactly.
Of the kitchen,
Plus, it's more romantic that way.
Absolutely.
When you want to romance the muffin.
It's emotional. It's a connection. Right.
Absolutely. Right. So, like I said, we're going to go to those camera settings I kind of set up earlier.
Okay.
And I'm going to get in here and create a little bit of a... Okay, so I'm a little more underexposed than I had wanted.
Okay.
And the closer you get with a macro lens, a lot of times the more you have to increase your lighting because you're not absorbing a lot of light from the entire frame. So I'm going to first thing drop down to 4.
Okay, so you're at f4 now.
I'm at f4.
Okay.
At 125, and see what that gives me. And that's better because I know now that in Lightroom or Photoshop, I'm going to be able to pull that out, and I have all the detail I want there. It feels a little dull, but when we go back in a few minutes and we look at this and we start to tweak it, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Because I know there was a question there about how much underexposed.
Right.
are things.
And this is good too. So Prasad was just asking, do you level your table to keep the food, before shooting? Is leveling important, or is that something that you do after the fact?
Who is that asked that question?
Prasad asked that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Because I have this thing where I have this hard time kiltering things, cantering things.
Cantering things, yeah.
In camera. So I try really hard to keep my table level. I actually keep a torpedo level in my camera bag.
Just to measure it.
And just to make sure everything, because I have this thing where, because it's kind of almost opposite sometimes.
Right, sure.
So I lose my way, and I can't make it level. And then I'm editing and I'm like, everything is crooked.
And on 1K was asking, you kind of answered this before, do you use any kind of makeup or anything on top of the food to enhance the look?
If it's edible. Water, oil, anything that could add some kind of a spectral highlight without it being creating something where the food is now inedible or is completely unnatural.
Right.
And that I don't like. So I've worked on commercial jobs where they create scenarios with food that are not natural.
Right. Like the nail polish on a cherry
or
something.
Bubbling on top of a steak that came out of a frying pan.
Right.
Like, that doesn't happen in real life.
Right.
And I reject that stuff and I push back and
Nice.
That's the thing. Okay, so I'm going to make this same shot now with my 100mm. Well, you know what? Let me back up a little bit. I have something over there I need. I'm going off camera.
Okay.
You will hear me. Those are my footsteps. Okay. I'm back. Okay. So this is another kind of bag of tricks that I have had for many years, and they're all stained with food. Some of these were the cardboard things in. Some of these were like the cardboard things you get in it with a T-shirt. Some of them are just pieces of black construction paper. This one here is probably a 10-year-old piece of foil-y card stock. And I use these in conjunction with some A-clamps like we have over here to create these kind of opportunities on small items to put light where I want it. So I will kind of do something like that.
Right.
And then you could see that I'm now all of a sudden creating a much different lighting on that food where I don't have to, and you can see it, I don't have to create too much light pushback, but I want it a little bit more.
A little bit more.
And conversely, if I wanted it to be moodier, I would just turn around and put a black card there and create more of a shadow, which I don't necessarily think I would do with a brown food.
With a brown muffin, right.
But for the most part, I would do that, and that would add more depth.
Right, more contrast.
Contrast in the color. So these little cards, it starts here, and it ends here. So you go from a card the size of your cupcake to a card the size of your room.
Right.
And we use them in this way to kind of manipulate daylight. So between something like this frosty paint on this window to the opal kind of panel to our little cards, whether it be a flat white card or a shiny white card or a black card or my little one with silver. All of this is meant to manipulate daylight in ways that kind of are softer and easier to manage. And then, of course, when you add a room-sized V-flat to the, when you really need a pushback on the table, that will help. I mean, you will eliminate shadows almost entirely in that situation. I want to show you what happens here, though, just so people understand that when I'm in here, I can get a brighter look in camera if I wanted it. It's just I don't need to be there in camera to make the shot I want in post-production.
Right. Now, Judah was just asking a great question. Do you ever do any bracket style shooting, like HDR style, where you do...
Not HDR, but bracketing. Yeah, I think bracketing when we're working, especially when we're working in a studio setting where I have a tech at the computer working on the tether, I'll say, okay, we got the shot. Give me bracket +1, -1.
Right.
And then we move on to the next shot.
Okay.
So that's always something you should do. Listen, you're not paying for film.
Right. So is that kind of your safety? You'll get
And that's
the shot
exactly
with a
the
single
word.
frame.
That's exactly the word I use too. I go, give me 2 safeties.
That's right.
This is what. This is what.
That's what we're talking about. All right.
I don't know what camera to look at.
We're here.
I keep looking at the monitor.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah,
The camera's
right.
so small.
That's right.
So, you can't come over here anymore because it makes me feel short.
Oh, come on.
So yeah, if you really wanna like low tech, low cost, this is all stuff you can get. You can make this stuff. You can buy this in the hardware store. You don't have to have any kind of specialized kind of idea. You understand how to manipulate daylight, and you have everything you need. You got a good window at southwest or northern exposure. Right. You're gonna get beautiful light.
Right.
You manage that light appropriately, and you're gonna be able to get nice food shots with the daylight setup.
And that's key too. You can just do it in natural light, assuming you have a good window that gets great lighting in the morning or something.
But it's also step one,
right?
Because
Right.
once you understand how to manage, then you could do something like what we did here today.
Right.
You created a situation where you're making daylight out of whatever you have.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've seen people do it with, those garage lamps
Right.
and a bulb.
Sure.
As long as the bulb is burning at the right color temperature,
You're gonna get
and
there.
you can manage it, you're going to be able to do it. And then, of course, food is small for the most part, unless you're doing a big tablescape. But 90% of what we shoot is one plate of food.
Right.
So with those requirements, you can use a lot of different things to light a table.
Right.
Or use daylight that, and then being able to push your camera to 1600 ISO, 3200 ISO. You don't need a lot of light. You just need the amount of light that's going to kind of give you what you need.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go from the 50 to the 100.
Okay.
And now this little thing I'm doing here, this little ritual of changing lenses, it's important to remember never to leave your lenses exposed.
Oh, yeah.
So always cap the old one
Before you put the new one on.
That's it, because you will forget, and then your lens is going to get destroyed, and you're going to be unhappy.
That's right.
So back to our little muffin. Okay. Now I'm going to pick out the best muffin here, because when you're working with food, particularly small food, you want to identify a hero. That's the terminology we use, not just for food, but for lots of different things.
Not all muffins are created equal.
That's true.
That's right.
Not all muffins are created equal. So you want to find something that's kind of interesting, that has texture. That I feel like we got 2 different kinds of heroes here. We have a hero that has this kind of multicolored stuff going on, and we have the ones with the seeds. Both add texture and some contrast to what we're doing. And I'm going to fill up the whole frame with one of these guys, and you'll see how different it is. Taking the lens cap off is always a plus.
Pro tip number 1.
Pro tip number 1.
Yeah.
So now we're filling up the whole frame with this tiny little cupcake. And again, now, what I said before was, the closer you get, the more light it's going to require.
Right.
So before I change my camera settings, I'm going to go back to my my little cards. I'm going to take a white card this time.
Just reflect a little more of that.
I'm going to push a little bit more light back into this. And see what that gives me before I start messing with my camera settings. And I still feel we're a little under, maybe a little more under than I want to be. So now I'm going to drop to 800 ISO and see where we go from there. And that's definitely better. And you can see that kind of streak in of the light coming across. So you could see it kind of picking up different little highlights on different things. And that's kind of the primary idea of doing something in a macro setting, right? Is to kind of focus on these tiny, tiny little details. Although I'm not loving that. So I'm going to come back to this one. I'm going to isolate it and maybe get a little bit above it and just kind of blast away at the middle of it, because that's going to be really graphic.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So the detail when you shoot with a macro lens really gives you the opportunity to look at something. And then of course that textural thing underneath, it all kind of lends itself to that detail-oriented idea of food.
And this comes back to why you said before why you never shoot with like prop food, because you're never going to get that realistic baked texture, all those things that you're trying to capture with the macro. It's not there in a model.
No, it's not.
Right.
Yeah, it's really flat
Right.
and it's really unappetizing.
Right.
And the whole idea of this is we're selling delicious.
Right.
That's
Right.
it. That's what we're
selling delicious.
We're selling delicious.
I like that.
So, okay. So we're still on the 100 millimeter, and we're still working in this kind of raking cross light. But as I start to move this way, and I always want to move this way, I never want to shoot with the light. And I'll show you why. So if I shoot with the light, you're going to notice how flat it is. There's no dimension.
Oh, yeah.
You see how flat that whole thing looks. It's not appetizing anymore because there's absolutely no romance left in the light.
Right.
And if you toggle back and forth between those two things, the one before and the one after, if we could do that, yeah, you could see the difference in the lighting quality. And that doesn't really give me much. But the one before it has this kind of quality of light that really adds to the depth of what we're taking a picture of. So conversely, rather than moving to shoot with the light, now I'm going to go a little bit more extreme and I'll go from a 3/4 angle instead of a side angle, which gives me something that looks like this, where now I have sort of a highlight peeking in out of a corner. Right? And that's that 3/4 lighting that I like to use, where it gives you this kind of like this highlight, and it really feels like it's sitting in a window.
You're bringing the delicious back now.
Yes.
It feels like
I'm bringing sexy back. You
knew where I was going with that.
Yes, absolutely.
And here we can actually do a little side by side with like that first one that we thought. Okay, so that was the original shot.
That's the original. So now that one kind of has that highlight behind because the light was raking across and it's sort of centered.
Right.
And then this one, you could see it's off to the left and peeking out of the corner, which is a nice technique, particularly if it's propped really well.
Right.
And you have this kind of illusion of depth where you have stuff back there and you put a pop of color with a napkin or a drink.
How much do you rely on sort of symmetry, like when you're doing this, like the way that it's kind of, you have this really nice V shape?
A lot.
Okay.
I think the graphic aspects of food photography and food in general, I like to play with shapes. One of my primary influences for my food work is architecture.
Okay. Yep. And you've said that a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just buildings and the way public space is laid out.
Right.
We're very comfortable there.
Right. It's
artistically.
familiar.
And
We
when
like
we're
it.
when we're working in and like architecture, food is three-dimensional.
Right.
So when you're working in three-dimensional art, regardless of whether it's a building size or a muffin as big as your your hand, it's the same.
Right.
And you treat it the same.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So we showed you straight on side lighting, a couple of different things. We've also kind of come around the table to do a kind of traditional 3/4 lighting. And then the other one that I use is straight back lighting, which is way more artistic in that you're really just playing with light and shadow at this point. Because you're going to get the front aspects of your frame are going to be much darker, but your backgrounds are going to be much brighter. So here's that idea of creating depth, right? Just by moving your body around. I didn't move any of the food. I just moved my body around. And that's where the lighting kind of comes into play here. And it's a pretty lighting. It's really pretty.
And it looks so. I'm going to keep emphasizing this because you said it too. It looks like daylight.
Yeah.
It really. I mean.
Yeah, it has that. It has that quality.
No, you'd never just say, "Oh, it's in the studio." You think, "Oh no, this is sitting in the bakery with a nice morning light, and people are coming up and picking out their favorite muffins."
Yeah,
it really feels that way.
So what we got on this? What we got questions? Anybody?
Everyone's kind of just saying nice, and they love it, and great textures and angles, and you're bringing it back. Oh, there was one question though. So yeah, why you went to ISO 800? Could you increase the light power? Well, here we don't have any more.
Well, yeah, but when it comes to the sun, you don't have the opportunity to increase the light power. And if you did have that power, I really want to talk to you about a couple other things because I really am interested in your abilities.
In your other abilities.
Yeah.
That's right. You're super
But yeah, if I were working with steady lighting here, and I wanted to achieve something, or a strobe light, I could obviously do that.
Sure.
But you got to wait till tomorrow. Come on, you got to hang in there for a couple of days to get to that.
That's right.
To get to the advanced lessons.
This is just part one here.
Yeah, we're just doing that. Okay, so if you find that in your backlit situation where I'm happy with this exposure, but some people might say, well, it's a little too shadowy on the front side. I want to add some back. So then I kind of do this thing where I create a little bit of a tunnel. I kind of have two of these going, and I'll shoot right through the tunnel. So I'll have one here, like that, and one here like this. If I can get that to stand up. And then I'll come right down in between them, frame them out, and shoot. And what that does is it kind of brings a little bit more light to the front part of my, you see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's another simple solution to doing a backlit technique where you're finding that your shadowing is a little bit too extreme. You could always push it back a little bit. Yeah, there it is.
Side by side, yeah.
Right, and it depends on what you like. But the idea is that just manipulating light in a daylight setting is, once you've understand directionality and how to push back and manipulate, you're going to have a really easy time of it.
And looking here too, it's significant enough. It's subtle, but yet it's significant enough that it brings out so much more in the image.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's so much more clarity.
Right.
And if that's what you're going for, then that's what you should do.
Right.
Still, totally.
Beautiful.
Okay. Anybody? Questions before I move on?
Okay. So Nige was asking, when and why would you choose to shoot with studio lights over natural lighting in your studio?
Winter.
Yeah. Okay.
Winter and long shoot days.
Right. Sure. Right. Of course. Right.
Well, that's one, but one is artistic. I mean, when the stuff that I showed on my website that I said was shot with strobe was intentional because it was for the Museum of Sex in New York City, and they have a cafe, and their whole, the whole feel of the place is a little bit edgy. It's a little naughty, it doesn't lend itself to food porn.
Right.
It lends itself to something a little more edgy, right? So that's why the lighting was that way. I wanted it to be sharp and tight and dark to light, really dramatic, because the whole setting was dramatic.
Right.
And
you don't want a subtle drop off.
I didn't. Yeah. I wanted it to be hard hitting, and that kind of the idea. You have to make those kind of artistic choices, and then again, if it's more commercial looking,
sure.
When you move, and this is subtly changing in the industry, but there's this movement to more natural looking food in advertising, but that has not always been the case. It's been a much more clean, sharp, kind of commercial look.
Right.
And when you want that look, you can't really shoot it in daylight. You have to shoot it in strobe.
Right. And this is where someone was asking for, this is where instead of shooting at f4 for those kind of, like for Museum of Sex, you might shoot at f8 or something. Right?
Yeah, well, that's when I go over the top too.
Right.
I use that's f8 is my go-to. So that you kind of looked at that picture and knew it was f8.
Brother,
Damn. I just that's all I gotta say. Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll stalk him on it.
Okay. Love that blah blah blah. What do we got? But if you don't have natural light,
advice for lighting settings.
Come tomorrow.
Right. Okay.
Because I'm going to be doing strobe tomorrow, and that's really going to be about creating this situation. Very much so with a strobe light. It's going to look very much like what we just did today in daylight, because that has taken me a lot of trial and error to get artificial lighting to look the way my lighting looks like in daylight.
Right. By the way, Andrew Fox just had a really nice comment for you too. Just such subtle changes. It's great to see you using analog techniques instead of dodge and burn, which I'm sure you occasionally use.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely that happens.
Right.
You get a frame and you're like, I love this frame, but it's just not exposed properly, you get into the software and there you go.
That's why we have it.
That's why we have it.
That's right.
Welcome to Adobe.
Nice.
Welcome to Tangier, Mr. Bond.
That's right. Oh, very good. Yeah, excellent. Okay, can you? Askash is asking, will you create an image with a dark background theme? So
yes, I will do that for you right now because I can do that on the fly.
Nice.
We're gonna get what's called a flag. So this is called a flag. in a studio setting. It's got this thing on the back, and it will go into a stand, which we have around here. I had one on standby here. I don't know where it went.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, I want the sandbag too, so I want to talk about that. So this is called the C-stand. It's called the C-stand because when you fold up the legs, they fold up in the shape of a C. And that's a sandbag that I just put on there. And if you didn't see that, know it. This is a sandbag, and this is what you do when you're using any of these stands with lighting, anything. Because if you're but if you're in my studio and you knock over a light and it's not sandbagged, you're not working again.
Right.
At least not for me.
Right.
So if you take this, you put it in what's called the knuckle right here. You tighten it down. And now you can kind of drag this around to where you want it. You could also put it on the end of this swing arm, which extends like that. So now I have this black background that I can either deaden light with or use as a backdrop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this at the edge of my situation here. I'm going to lower it back down to become a background.
People are really digging this behind-the-scenes process, Andrew. This is so
Cool. Well, in my studio, the lighting is the window light is like a box. It's like it's an inset box into the room, and what happens is when I shoot this way, where I'm standing just falls off to black.
Right.
Naturally.
Right.
Plus, I have a curtain system in my studio where I just draw curtains around the back of the studio table, and then I have what I need. So I'm going to try to shoot as shallow as possible here. I don't want any light bleed, so I want this to come down as far as I can get it. Let's see if I have an idea. Are there any more of those little half apples or quarter apples laying around?
We can probably snag.
Or just something to prop it up just a little bit so it gets it under the black. It doesn't have to be much. Oh wait. Shoot, I got one right here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I got one right here. So this is an apple box.
Without apples.
No apples in it.
From Macromedia, look.
Right.
That's old school.
Right. So we use these in the studio to prop things up, to stand on, to do all kinds of things. If you're in a situation in the studio and you ask for an apple, this is what you get.
That's right.
Not a computer. Not a piece of fruit.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm going to prop this up because I want the background to be consistent. I don't want light bleeding underneath it. I also am going to shoot this really shallow so that the background falls away. And let's see what we get. There it is. Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the lighting I do. I mean, that's the technique I employ, and it doesn't really change, no matter where we are.
It's a Scrivani stand.
It is the Scrivani, and it's such a it's so that one change now is so dramatic, and yet you still have that same feeling of the daylight.
Yeah.
But yet it's this very signature kind of look here, which also changes the way I'm feeling about wanting to eat it. Somehow, it's a little edgier, and I'm more aggressively hungry with this image. If that makes any sense.
Well, I think the idea of day to night too.
Right.
Right. I think we're later in the day now, so now of course I'm hungrier.
Right.
It's later in the day. We can intellectualize anything.
I know, we can exactly.
Whatever you
right.
like. Whatever you like.
Whatever you like. Yeah.
What else? Anybody over there? Internet? What do you got for me?
They're just wowing and loving and saying this is the Judah says the best photography class he's ever had.
All right. Well, that's pretty damn cool.
Very nice.
I like that. Okay.
Oh, and then they're also asking if you want to stay through Friday so you can do even more. You know.
Let's see if you still like me on
That's
Thursday.
right. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm really happy with this. I mean, right out of the camera, I haven't even touched this in Photoshop yet. And I'm loving it, and I may drop my... And this is basically a zero black technique, where my blacks, when you pull them up in Photoshop, will be zero. Or if they're not zero, they're very close.
Right.
And I really like that technique, and particularly with this kind of side lighting idea, is that now just everything behind it just goes dead,
Right.
and it just creates this really dramatic setting. And it's very my work has been described as painterly, you know, and they talk about the Dutch kind of
Sure.
still life paintings
Right.
from that era. And I'm obviously flattered by that, but it is definitely one of the inspirations for how I shot food, because I didn't apprentice as a food photographer. I just jumped in. And I think that's what a lot of people do with food photography, because you get inspired by what's there, you're a good cook,
Right.
and you want to capture it.
capture it.
And that was how I got started. And my only experience with food visuals was through looking at museum paintings.
Right.
I didn't really look at magazines and read food magazines and buy cookbooks to look at the photography.
Right.
So,
And it wasn't as beautiful and stylized years ago either.
no, it was very Strobey.
It was Strobey, right? Like you said, Strobey. It was commercial for a purpose.
Until one magazine changed that, Gourmet.
Oh, right.
And they changed it with a lighting technique that I'm going to show everybody tomorrow.
Awesome.
So there's a teaser.
There's a teaser. All
Got
right.
a teaser.
All right.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
We're exactly at 1 hour, so probably,
About an hour.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, because I want to show how we use this
Right.
bad boy.
We'll shoot a few more and then process a little bit at the desk. So
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay.
20 minutes?
So. Okay. So what I'm going to do now? Give me a minute to set up this. I'm going to go back to my. I'm going to go to a. I'm going to go to a third lens.
That's right. So this was again. So Danielle, which is that was the 100mm, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So that was 100mm.
For first 50, then 100.
Right.
Now I'm going back to 50, but I'm
Right.
not going macro anymore.
Right.
This is a 51.2
Yep.
L series lens. This
That's
is
right.
this is a serious piece of glass, not like that other little pipsqueak.
Yes. Holds its value very well on eBay.
Yes.
And yes, Vincent, this is being tethered to Lightroom.
I mean, what else would we be tethering to? Really? Okay, so taking care of the lenses, making sure everything gets put away properly. Lens caps, end caps. That's the wrong lens cap.
Okay. Right.
And we put everything out of the way. Get rid of this apple box, which I'm going to use to stand. I may use that stand on at some point. Okay. So the first thing I want to do while I'm setting everything up is get the camera out of harm's way. I want to get the camera up and on the stand waiting for me.
Right.
And I want to set it up in a way where nothing is going to be underfoot. I work in a very small studio 90% of the time. And organization on set is really important to me because it's very easy to get tripping, falling,
Right.
getting
We've got
involved in all
cables
kinds of
everywhere
stuff.
here. I mean,
So
this
I had
is-
set
yeah.
this up earlier. So I got my cable here. Sometimes I would have this tethered in here where it's kind of locked off. Then I kind of draw it back to the back of the stand, take a piece of gaffer's tape, and get that wire out of the way. So now when I'm wheeling this around, it's not tripping over the wire. Then what I do is I kind of bring it to where I want it. And this thing is really heavy. And then I'm going to set the camera the way I want it. Now this camera head has a bubble level in it, so I know that I'm going to be level.
That's right. So again, that's talking about getting it level and correct before you
Yes.
snap a frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Nice.
camera's in position. I'm going to be able to go up or down with it as I need to. I'm going to get our muffins out of the way. Because
We're going to some cookies and ooh.
well, I got one thing in mind here,
Uh-huh.
and there's
I knew that
two
was the one.
reasons.
Ooh.
This is a little whoopie pie
Yeah.
kind of guy,
Oh.
but it's also something about the circular
plate, yeah.
of the plate and the lines on top that are really speaking to me. Lots of stuff speaks to me in the night.
Right.
There are times
He hears voices.
I hear voices.
And Jeanette, yeah, this is being just tethered with a tethering cable from the Mark IV directly into the laptop to Lightroom.
All right, so this is a little bit harder to do with Lightroom because we don't have a live view feature. So I'm going to have to focus the camera manually. And then what I'll do is once the camera is focused, I'll take it out of autofocus mode.
Right.
So it's just locked onto what I want. And then as I change my height and whatever, I'll have to change that as
readjust,
well.
yeah.
So we got the camera set the way we want it. I think this lens will only focus up to about 3 feet at the most, or at the least, or whatever. Now, I'm shooting this a little wider, knowing that it's a big file. And if I want to get closer to it,
Right.
I can.
Crop and recompose. Yeah.
Right. So I'm set up here overhead, and I haven't really looked at any settings yet. So this is just a test shot. Okay, way too bright and whatever for me. So the first thing I might do is something like this. I don't have the opportunity here to change surfaces, but I would definitely go with a darker surface. So I'm gonna show you what that might look like with this darker surface. Because here's the thing, this dark cookie light plate, light surface
Right.
doesn't work.
Right. Right.
It needs to have some kind of contrast to bounce off of. So this will be the same shot, but now on a darker background. And immediately we got a much
yeah.
different feel.
Yeah.
So now the second thing I want to do is I want to increase my ISO. I want to increase my aperture to 8. So I'm going to do a count and click method, right? So if you've never been familiar with making camera setting changes, here's a quick way. I'm going to go up aperture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 8.0. Now I'm going to go backwards with the shutter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where we land is at 25th of a second at 8.0. Now what this means is if I'm not on this thing,
Right.
I'm going to get camera shake all over the place. But because I'm locked down, I don't have this problem. So, okay. So now I'm at the settings I want. Let's see what that has done to the image. Okay, so it's nice and sharp. Can we, I don't know if we can rotate that, can we?
Rotate the photo here. Just
Clockwise.
yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So we're not quite centered, which is okay.
Yeah.
That's
you got more room to crop.
It's totally fine. I got lots of room to crop. I still feel it's a little bright, so I may add a little bit of shutter. So I'm going to just do 2 clicks, so 2/3 of a stop, and then I'm going to add a black card because I want to see if I can create a little more shadow on that other side. So right outside of the frame, I'm going to make sure I'm outside of the frame, which I'm not. So right outside of the frame, I'm going to center it a little bit better. There we are. Okay, now we're centered. And my black card's outside of the frame. Let's see if it can add, and I added a little bit of shutter speed. So let's see if we get a little bit more drama here. Drama mama. Oh yeah, we got some drama. So you can notice it on the cookie itself, right? Is that there's a light side and a darker side. So we're starting to craft this light the way we like it. Now, again, in post-production, we could enhance this effect even further. Now, the next thing I want to do with this is I'm going to change out lenses one more time and go back to my 50 macro because I want to get closer. Because I want to exploit the graphic aspects of what's happening with that circles on the plate. So okay, so we're really graphic now. I can really push in that black card really tight. And let's see what we get. Yeah, see now, like all of that kind of texture that's happening with the plate, and you can really see what's happening with the lighting. I might at some point would even filter that even further and knock down that highlight, but I could always burn and dodge to make those things happen as well.
Right.
So, how are we doing on questions? We okay?
Yep, we're good.
There's lots of comments. I like comments are good. Drama queen. Who's the drama queen? Who are you calling a drama queen?
It looks like an eyeball staring into evil Cerise's soul. That's what
Yes.
Yes.
That's exactly how I intended it.
That's right.
You're very, very astute.
Right.
Love it. Okay. And then obviously at a certain point you can really get really crazy with it and start to do stuff like this, where you go lose all sense of perspective on size. And get really super tight. And really see what's going on there. So it's kind of cool, and you can that kind of circling aspect, and you see that sharpness, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's at 8.0, you get that super sharp, and that lens is amazing for that little lens.
And again, you're at 1/40th of a second here, but this is only really possible with that level of sharpness because you're locked down with this.
That's it. You have to be. So I wanted to talk to you about this because I know this is a piece of equipment that is not readily available to everybody who's listening and playing with their cameras and food. But if you have a tripod, they sell an attachment called the cross arm that you can attach to the head of your tripod, and it shoots out like this, and then you can put your camera head on the end of it and angle it down towards the tabletop. And I used that for years, but truth be known, if you don't sandbag that thing,
you gotta have to weight it.
You gotta weight it
somehow.
really heavily.
Yeah.
You have to sandbag both the tripod and whatever, all the feet around it. You got, because if that thing tips over, your camera's gone.
You're gone.
So you have to be really careful with that, which is another reason why I went to the camera stand.
Right.
And falling off the ladder into a bowl of soup.
Oh. Yeah.
It's a funny story.
Oh yeah.
If we got a minute.
This happened?
Yeah. No, this totally happened. Okay. So here's how it goes. So I'm up on the table, climbing like a monkey, trying to take a picture of soup with my brand new 5D Mark III. Right? Brand new. First day out of the box using it. My food stylist is in the kitchen. She brings the food to the table. I'm styling a little bit. I'm over the top. I'm ready to take the shot. I put my foot on something that I thought was the table. It happened to be a black card, not the black table. I slip. I go down. My hand with the camera goes into the bowl of soup, shatters the glass everywhere. And I come up with the camera and my bloody hand, and I look at Olga and I go, "Take this and clean it." She's like, "You're bleeding." I went, "Clean the camera."
Oh my God, yeah.
So I went to the hospital and she cleaned up the studio.
So now that happens. I mean, obviously you've booked a day for. What does that mean for your client?
Well, I mean, if that happened to be a New York Times job, and we kind of work on our own schedule.
Okay.
So they give us everything ahead of time, and then I put
time
together production, and then I deliver on a certain date.
Okay.
If it happened that was a problem, luckily with certain clients, when you have a good relationship with them, you say, "Yes, I'm normally reliable, but today I'm in the hospital."
That's right. Right.
So
they have 15 stitches and painkillers.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay.
All right, we have a couple of question marks on that screen, so let's see what we say.
Okay. So isn't the ISO setting too high?
It doesn't necessarily have to. It could go. I could go lower, but then I'm going to be shooting at like a much slower shutter.
Right.
And as it is, like when we shoot like this, if I go to a much slower shutter speed, then I got to make sure nobody's walking on this floor.
Right. So
like this floor. This floor is not going anywhere.
Right.
That camera stand is heavier than mine.
Right.
But if I'm in my studio on a wood floor in a rickety old East Village, apartment,
vibration.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot of vibration, and so you need to try to mitigate those things the best you can.
And a point you made earlier too, 800 today on that camera.
It's indistinguishable.
Right. There's no noise to speak of. You're
No.
not, especially because of the way you've set the lighting.
Yeah.
This is
no.
not, and we
I
just
don't-
saw with the
right.
sharpness.
So
here.
I get no noise. Yeah, look at this. I mean, look at those blacks. I mean, that's just unbelievable. How sharp that is at 800.
Yeah. Yeah, look
I mean,
at
you can blow
this.
that up the size of a billboard.
Yeah. All right.
We'll have to clone that out.
Yeah. I was gonna say this nice little sort of caramelized sugar right
Yeah.
there. Looks really good.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Beautiful. Okay. What is that camera stand? What is it called?
it's called the FOBA, FOBA, and they make them in all different sizes and shapes with all kinds of different features. This one happens to be a pretty heavy duty one. You'll see these in most big photo studios. The one I have is the same shape and size, except it's a little lighter.
Right.
So it's
okay.
easier to move around. It's not a 10-footer though.
Right.
Mine is an 8-footer.
Okay.
The 10-footer is really helpful when you want to do a huge
Right, like you said,
tablescape.
a big tablescape. Right?
At that, you
need
really
that.
need that, but you also then have to work with lens aberration, and you have to
Right.
find the balance between whether you want to do it as a one shot or a stitch.
A stitch. So that's
You
a
know?
great question. So for something like that, would you use a 14 millimeter? Would you use?
No, never.
Never.
No. It's way too fisheye.
Right.
You know, I get even with the last time I did it on a big tablescape, 72 inches wide. I shot it with 35 at 8 feet, and I still had to correct for
Oh, right.
barrel
Okay.
barrel
Yeah,
aberration.
sure.
You know,
Right.
where it starts to
Right.
starts
Yeah, the
to
lens
bend,
distortion on
and
the
the
heads.
and the wider you go,
Sure.
the more that happens.
Right.
So depending on the client, like that was a New York Times thing, and it was the biggest photo that ever ran in the New York Times.
Oh, right.
Because it was what they called a pano 8.
Right.
So it was 8 sheets of broad
Right.
broad sheet. So the picture when you unfolded it of the Thanksgiving table was this
Right.
wide.
Right.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
but it was
sounds
so
amazing.
stressful to shoot because you know with the Times we weren't going to do a stitch.
Right.
You know, because it's
Right.
that's not the way
That's
they do
not
things.
the way they do things,
But
right.
if it was for a different client, I would have shot that in 4 images.
Right. 4 images, put them together.
Stitched them all together,
Right.
shot them with my 50, and been done.
And
with
again,
it.
that's possible because you're on a stand, you're not adjusting height, everything's going to remain the same, just the lateral positioning.
Well,
will be
the
different.
year before that for Thanksgiving, we did a very similar thing with a stop motion animation, where we showed the dinner table being decimated.
Right.
Just one step at a time,
Right.
right? So it went from a beautifully set dinner
Right.
table to utter chaos,
plates and
to
dirty-
filthy
yeah, right,
tablecloth.
right.
And we did it just like that. It's one step at a time, one shot at a time.
Right.
You know, the lighting had to stay the same from shot to shot
Right.
because you had to marry them all together. So when you're in this situation, or like what we spoke about earlier with an HDR shot,
Right.
you need to be locked off
Right,
because you
gotta be
can't
locked off.
hand hold a camera and then have those pictures married together.
Right.
effectively.
It'll never look right.
No, it
It'll
won't
be
work.
convincing enough.
It won't work.
Okay. That's okay. What else? So yeah, the camera stand again. That's a
Did
FOBA.
that camera ever work again?
Yeah.
Yes.
It
The
did.
camera was fine.
The camera was fine.
Thanks to Olga.
Nice.
The stitches in my hand got better. The
Right.
camera was fine. So everything worked out.
Everything worked out. Very, very good.
So, photo, T-shirt, and Adobe Max. Is it a YouTube channel? I don't know.
Oh, you're talking.
Link
Creative
for stop
Agency.
motion video. Look on my Instagram feed at Andrew Scrivani if you want to see that. You have to go back to like this November of 2015.
Oh, okay, going back about 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay,
Or
nice.
you look it up on the
New York Times.
New York Times.
website,
You
I
get
guess.
it. You can find any of my stuff on the New York Times, and that stop motion animation. You just put in like Thanksgiving table,
Oh, yeah.
stop motion,
Oh, nice.
New York
Okay.
Times, whatever. That you can find that. It's all there.
Awesome.
So, I guess what we could do at this point is maybe move over to the computer and answer some more questions,
Okay.
and then talk about how we could kind of play with these a little
some
bit, and just some of the light touch processing that I work on, and
Okay.
do that a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. Okay.
So are we taking this computer with us? How are we doing
We
that?
are, so here when Michael gives us the cue, we can unplug. Good. Okay.
Cookies are up for grabs.
Oh yeah.
Woo! Whoever wants the whoopie pie. I like how delicately you're doing all that.
Just a sec. Cool. That's
All right, cool. All right, so then we gotta plug back into the system.
Yes. Okay. Here. It's probably your. Can you get through there?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Get your.
Don't you want to get back to your
Here's heat. Yeah. Oh, thank you. This is for you. Thank you. Okay. We'll just swap these. All right.
Oh, should we put that? Spin that monitor.
Oh, yes, thank you. Almost forgot to do that before.
Chat.
All right. Hey, Kelsey. Yeah, so we were doing live tethering via Lightroom with the tether cable from the Mark IV directly in, via USB. So, as we were mentioning earlier, the Sony camera they were using, not currently supported for tethering, but naturally the Canon 5D Mark IV is. So.
I have a great story for the stop motion.
Oh, yeah.
So, the other job that I have, besides shooting food, is I direct commercials for food. And when I put on the director's cap, and I have a lot of fun with that idea. So, the stop motion was clearly a photography job, but we treated it like a commercial.
Right.
So, basically, I gave everybody a role, a Thanksgiving table role.
Okay.
Right? So, we had 8 people around the table.
Yeah.
Because nobody was going to be in the pictures. They were just going to be eating the food.
Right.
In stages.
Right. Consuming it to
Right.
actually empty the plates.
Except we had the picky vegetarian, the grotesquely overindulgent uncle.
Right.
The person who's late with the tinfoil over it.
Right.
So we kind of created characters for every plate, and it really showed up in the stop motion. You could really see the people who
And the personality.
of the
Right.
plate, the person
Right.
eating it, because everybody eats with a certain personality.
Sure,
they divide
of
their
course,
plate
right.
differently. They eat their plate differently, and we tried to do that in that stop motion, and it was so much fun. And at the end of it, we were all so full and so drunk
Right.
because we drank like 3 bottles of
Right,
wine.
of course. Well,
And we did it all in about 45 minutes.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, we ate the whole table full of food and drank 3 bottles of wine on camera in 45 minutes.
That's a New York Thanksgiving I want to be at for sure. Right. Nigel's asking, do you ever do one-to-one or group tutorial sessions in your studio?
I've thought about it. One-to-one is a little hard. I've been approached on a number of occasions, but I've never really felt that it was the right setting, even for the student, to be one-on-one. But I've talked to people, and here's my standard answer with this: is if you want to organize it, I'll do it.
Right.
Because I don't really have the time to kind of constantly. If I want to start a side business as a personal instructor, then I could.
Right.
But there have been times, particularly out here on the West Coast, here in San Francisco and out in Seattle, where people have organized workshops and then hired me to come.
Right.
And I have some guidelines and some people that, if you reach out to me through social or whatever, I can put you on to the people that have helped me, and they can kind of explain to you like what the parameters are and how I do that. So I usually like to work with a group of between 5 and 10.
Okay.
And, if we can get it organized, then I'm happy to do it.
And so it is possible.
It's totally possible. It's just not something I organize myself.
Right.
I actually have a few people that like to do that stuff, that they did it for me for their own purposes.
And I imagine your workload too. I mean, it's all dependent on that.
Yeah, it is. And, it all depends on where do you want me? What city do you need me in? And at my studio, as much as I really would love to do it, it just never seems to work out that way. Because it's busy there. It's just a busy place. And it's just hard to kind of carve out the time to do it.
Right. Okay.
So
let's see. Deshnu's asking, am I Adam Levine's metalhead brother? Curiously, my middle name is Adam.
Huh.
So, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
All right. Looks like your Fujifilm X-T20 doesn't qualify. Oh, no, Kelsey, I think... Oh, for tethering. Okay, that could be. I don't know for sure. Yeah.
Oh, maybe not.
Quite possibly.
Maybe not. But
with every subsequent update, though, they're adding more camera support. So hopefully we'll see that one in there. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Right. Okay, so I want to.
We're in Lightroom now.
We're in Lightroom, and I want to just kind of go through some. Here's that really dark one that we started with, where I said, okay, this isn't problematic because we could always play around with the exposure and everything else.
Right.
So I'll start there, and I'll just start pulling it out. And really, I don't really have to do much here.
Right, actually.
I mean, it's considerable.
Right.
It's over a stop.
Right.
But it's there. The information is there. We didn't lose anything by shooting it under, and we're not losing any resolution
Right.
by pulling it out. And then from there, just kind of, I start to play with. I start with my exposure and my blacks always, because I really like to play with that, because the blacks really kind of add to that shadowy look that I like.
Right. And just to that point too, again, these were shot ISO 400, right? So again, you're up a whole stop, but there's no noise introduced here.
Not at all.
This is not even something you'd worry about it in any case.
Well, also the file in the Mark IV is huge.
Right.
It's a
massive.
really big file. You got to get more storage space in the computer for this stuff. So, and then kind of like, you see how I like these background blown out. So I kind of push that. I'm going to push those highlights up a little bit. It's not doing anything to my hero, yet it's bringing that background up and out a little bit more, giving me more of an illusion of depth.
Right.
And then if I have to pull it back a little bit, I can. But you can see when you pull the shadows all the way out 100%, it's still not overexposed.
Right.
It's not moody enough for me.
Right, I was gonna say it loses the moodiness. Actually, yeah.
So shooting at underexposed. So this is just basic. I mean, I'm not even in Photoshop yet.
Right,
Not even. So this is really just basic stuff. If I want to push my clarity up, it's usually very subtle, 15. Vibrance and saturation, I'm usually under 10.
Right. These are great points too, particularly with clarity, because this is something which is very easy to overdo.
Yep. Your picture gets really crunchy,
Right.
and you got to be careful with your clarity and your contrast, because the more you push on that, the less it looks like a natural image.
I was gonna say, right, and you're going for natural, realistic, not not synthetic, not simulated. It's supposed to feel, it should be the thing.
And that's the thing, is that when you start to mess around with lighting, and you start to get involved with strobes and hot lights, and then on top of that you're over processing your images, it ceases to have the quality of light that looks like real food again. Right now, it doesn't look real anymore, and it looks very commercial, or it looks very. And look, if you're going for that really artistic, I'm totally down with that.
Right.
It just doesn't happen to be what people hire me to do.
Right.
So, okay, so I have, what was that?
Evil Cerise says, clarity is like cowbell. The more, the better. To each his own, Evil Cerise. Yes. Start a trend with that. Yeah, I like that.
Okay. So, I mean, you can use the tone, wave here if you really feel that's that's not usually my comfort zone in how I process my images. But it's there if need be. And then from here, like this one, the lens correction thing, this chromatic aberration, that's the thing I was talking about, where you get that bend, and then if you hit that button, it just goes snap, and it just snaps right back into place, which is a really good tool to have if you're going with a much wider frame.
Right. And again, shooting with primes, you might sometimes get that purple magenta hue around the edge.
Totally. Let's see. Camera calibration, so you can kind of mess around a little bit with your color profile here.
Now, I was going to ask you too about detail and sharpening. So what are your thoughts on that, and how much of that, if any, do you apply when shooting like this?
Not a lot. I mean, I used to throw a high pass filter over my shots, but I found that it was just so negligible in what it did to the image that it wasn't worth the extra step.
Right.
There are times when it's appropriate, but honestly, I feel like I've worked it out in the camera well enough at this point where I feel really comfortable not having to throw a filter over it or doing too much clarity or.
And like you said, with the shot from above, you're at f8, focus is locked.
Yeah.
It's sharp. It's there.
And this camera now has this thing that has that kind of that setting where it's almost like focus stacking,
Right. Yeah.
where
Right.
in one image.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really crazy
Right.
where it'll take that depth of field and multiply it back until you
Right.
want it to stop.
Right.
So if you want to go from the front of the cupcake to the back of the cupcake and then let everything fall away,
Right.
it'll look like this even
Right.
if you didn't shoot it that way.
Right, right.
So the technology is at a point where, knowing how to do it in the camera is great, but being a wizard on the computer.
Sure. Yeah.
You
It's,
know.
right. It's just one more tool in the toolbox.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's scroll up to.
Now, would you start marking these as favorites? Would you flag or do you star? Or what's your particular?
Well, I mean, I have a kind of an old school.
because you didn't
editing
take
process.
that many images either. I'm also very impressed by that. I love that you're like, got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you do it as much in any, and it's not. We're
that
not talking
varies,
about
right?
people.
Some
we're not
take,
talking about
you know.
people with facial expressions,
Right.
But when you find that your lighting is where you want it to be, the food looks like it's not going to change.
Right, right.
You don't have to have it replated.
It looks frumpy now. You made it sad. It took too long, right? Yeah, no. Right.
Exactly.
It's not going to change.
It's not going to change. So when you have it, and you move on because you just want to be efficient when you're working. And I have a tendency to want to work fast.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it comes with doing it.
And
a lot.
experiences
Right.
has taught me.
That's right.
Usually, the first one you shoot is the best one. Mm-hmm. And
Wrap your stuff up for you. I need that table.
oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's really just
whatever you need, no problem. And welcome.
1K is asking, do you use a monitor calibration software?
No, I know that it exists
Right.
and everything else, but I guess I work with my computer and my stuff 90% of the time, and when I work on a commercial job where the
Right.
tech is handling that stuff, I don't even worry
Right.
about it.
What do you use any additional? I mean, are you using an external monitor in your studio when you are processing and finishing, or are you just doing it on the laptop?
On the laptop. I mean,
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I'm totally comfortable with that. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, and the biggest, most important work that we do commercially, we don't even process it.
right.
We send it
right.
out to retouchers.
You send it out to retouchers. Yeah.
So that's a
yeah.
big part of it. They get the raw files and work from there.
And again, looking at these, I mean, raw files. Right. What more really needs to be done if that's what you're going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's that open in Photoshop thing?
Oh yeah. So you can just right click on it right
oh,
here.
here.
Or control click it.
Control click.
There, so select it. Yep. Control click.
Control click. I'm not doing it. Okay. I'm not good at the right.
I'm such a right clicker. I always enable that option, even on my Magic Mouse.
Open anyway.
Yeah. Does it tell you have a Photoshop update or camera update or something?
Okay, so I'm dropping this now into Photoshop to kind of put some finishing touches on it. And I want to show you a couple of things I do pretty regularly.
The secret sauce.
The secret sauce.
Someone's asking, what do you think when other food, Estuardo, what do you think when other food photographers take a picture with your style?
I'm flattered.
Right.
I mean, I've been one of the most prolifically published food photographers of the last decade because the New York Times has offered me a platform that's sort of unrivaled. When we did the Recipes for Health column, we were published every day of the week for 7 years. So I published thousands of images. I never, when you have that kind of a platform, clearly
You're going to influence.
you're going to
people.
influence
Right.
people,
Right.
right? Because it's there every day.
Right.
And I was really gratified when
Right.
the industry started to shift to the darker, moodier style because I was like, well, now I don't have to fight with art directors anymore, which was a constant fight, that you're too moody, you're too masculine, you're too this, you're too that. And it's sort of like, I'm an Italian guy from New York. I mean, what do you want from me? This is what I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's... and the software I use is the software we're here with.
We're looking at it.
You're looking at it.
That's right.
I use Photoshop. I've used pretty much everything in the repertoire, one way or another, over the years. Anything that's photo related through Adobe.
So that's a good question from JD Melville. So do you actually use or create any presets? Like, because you might have similar lighting setups. Do you ever do like apply this that has already your slightly more highlights
when we're in a commercial setting where there's clients on set looking at the monitors,
Right.
we'll throw a filter over it that's going to look like
what it will look like when
exactly,
it's done.
because
Right.
if I show a client that
Raw,
underexposed
that's
raw
right.
file,
They're
they're
not
not
gonna
going to
get
know
it.
what's going on.
Right.
So that will be where my tech is sitting here in
Yep.
front of the computer with Lightroom and is applying those filters, and then every time I click the button,
Right.
it just magic.
That's what it's going to look like.
That's what it's
right.
going to look like.
And that's, it's actually, I love hearing you say that, because it's the same in video, right? We're so, now today especially,
Yeah.
you shoot flat. I was on a shoot years ago with some people from Nikon, and they wanted to see what I was. It was a safari, and I'm showing them the raw stuff off the camera, and it's there's no saturation, no contrast,
Yeah, of course.
and their first thought was, by the way, it was a beta version of a camera, and they're like, is there something wrong with the camera? And I said, no, it's fantastic, it's great. And they didn't get it, and I said, okay, wait, we have to wait till we're back out of the field so I can show you. I'll put a LUT on this,
Yes, of course.
a filter, and you'll get to see what it looks like. And then it kind of clicked. But you're right. So this is great to know that it's the same as photography.
Oh,
really.
it totally is. Yeah, I mean the LUT kind of aspect of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
When you're working in those kind of really flat color
Right.
profiles,
Right.
you
Because
have-
you're saying you got it, and they're like, I don't know, it looks kind of overexposed.
And honestly,
there.
the people that you're dealing with on a set like that are not creatives,
Right. And they're not
and
technical
it's very
generally.
hard to process. Oh, that's going to look better when what? I don't get it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
one of the things I might do here is, you see this background up here. I may try to blow the rest of that out. So if I zoom in, what happened here? Hold on. If I zoom in here, and I don't want that. Command Z, my favorite.
That's right.
My favorite.
Hey, that's a good question. Are you a shortcut guy?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not super skilled in Photoshop. Maybe not as skilled as a lot of other photographers who rely on it more heavily. But you see, like, I may just kind of get some kind of a consistency to this background.
Right.
That's blending a little bit choppy. I may go back, and that's one of the other great things about this, is that you can always just go back where you started.
Right.
So if I go up here, and I don't want to do a replace, I want to do a lighten, and then I kind of, well, it's not really going the way I want it to go.
Is there a lot of trial and error involved with
I think
these kind of
so.
things? Yeah.
For me, it is, because I'm not a typically very good retoucher. I've been surrounded by very good retouchers, but I don't know. This is essentially a general idea of what I might do to just kind of clean up this background. It's ugly right now because I'm terrible at it, but eventually I'd get there, and I may just kind of consistently blend out that background. Why is that so bad? What am I doing wrong? I know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not letting my retoucher do this. Okay, so in general, I would use a spot. I use the spot healing tool a lot.
Okay, yeah.
To take a little crumb out.
I was going to ask you about that, because in that...
So like something like that little speck right there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I didn't mess that up.
And the
you know?
whoopie pie had a few specks. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, well, let's go. We'll
Yeah.
go to that one.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I wanted to go with this anyway. I just picked the wrong... I decided to fight the wrong fight. Okay, so we're back here. Let's go and see what else we did. So again, these images, there's that one I thought was a hero, but it really wasn't. And then we have the differences between the kind of standard side lighting, and then that was the ugly one.
Right.
And you can really see the differences in that there's no dimension. And then the three-quarter lighting, which I think might have been my favorite. And then the straight backlighting, and then the straight backlighting with fill.
Oh, yeah.
And then the dark background.
Yeah.
So now this one, to play with this one, we go and just take these blacks and drop them right out, right? And even create more drama here.
Yeah.
Then play with the exposure just a little bit, right? And you got this. This highlight's really hot, but it's okay because it's not on the food.
Right.
So like when I have these really hot, blown out highlights on something, I leave them. As long as they're not interfering with the way the food looks,
Right.
because then it just adds to the atmosphere of the shot. I don't concern myself too much.
And you
with
made that point too. If you were, spraying water on a vegetable to give it more detail,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to be mindful of those things, but as long as it doesn't get in the way of the actual food itself.
it. Right.
Yeah.
And looking at this shot, it's maybe even a little softer than I would have would have liked. I might have just given it a little bit more depth of field, because I did this intentionally because I was afraid that black flag wasn't going to fall off enough. I didn't want to see the texture of it. I just wanted it to be dead black. But it ended up working out really well. So I could have added a little bit more depth of field to this picture and gotten a little bit more crunchy crispness to the edges. But it's still pretty.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's delicious.
Delicious.
Making me so hungry, man. Oh my god.
Oh, we only got a few minutes.
Yeah, we got 20 more minutes. Oh, and Evil Ceresis, Jason, the shortcut guru. So I'm a, fully 100% self-professed non-shortcut person. I know about 8 of them. Like the standard, like you said, Control Z. Got it. Command Z,
good.
whatever,
Command S, Command W.
Command W, Command Q, V. It's always the move tool, or select whatever.
Why don't I spot heal in Lightroom? Because I'm more comfortable in Photoshop. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and that's, people ask that all the time, and why don't you do all your processing in Lightroom versus Photoshop? I mean, you have access to, especially since they added Camera Raw.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that there's, these products are designed for multiple approaches to any problem. And if you go down the rabbit hole, you have to find, it's like any other artistic form, you have to find a style. And you have to find a workflow that works for you. Workflow is a big word in our studio. We talk a lot about workflow. And it's also very difficult for people who've been working in these programs for decades to change their habits, to adapt to the new styles.
You were saying before, Photoshop, it has such a legacy. It's it's just, there's a lot going on in there.
Well, I mean, I've been editing I had been editing in another program for decades. Been editing in this program, and I got really comfortable with it, and then I can do the same things in Bridge, but it's sort of like, okay, well, do I want to do that? And you could do the same things in Lightroom, and so like, okay, well, I gotta break out of my habits here, So I like that everyone on the thing is answering the questions without us.
That's right, I know.
They're just answering the questions.
We have a very, very informed
What is the deal
chat.
with Camera Raw? Oh, okay, I can answer that. So, most professional photographers and lots of other, and I could talk about the journey to food photography as well. But the RAW file is basically a digital negative, and we didn't have this option when digital photography first started. We had to shoot JPEGs. And once the Camera Raw application kind of became part of the regular workflow for photographers, it offered us so much more power in how we enhanced the images and how we could manage the images, and then we learned to shoot appropriate to the Camera Raw file, rather than shooting appropriate to the JPEG file, which was much more limited than what you could do in post-production.
Absolutely.
So if you have a camera that shoots RAW, you have to shoot it that way. Learn how to use it, because it adds so much more power to what you could do as a photographer. It's a very clear.
No, that's a great answer. And Olivia's asking, doesn't Lightroom make Camera Raw obsolete? I mean, no, because again, if you're going to Photoshop, and you're going to be doing some other things, the reality is it's the equivalent of the develop module here. And there's things that you can do in Lightroom that you can't do in Photoshop, and vice versa.
Well, I've appreciated the fact that Adobe has not abandoned those of us who are dinosaurs who like doing things the old way, because it very simply could have said, okay, we don't need these other programs, we could just do it this way.
You've got the develop module.
Now, and forcing their customer base to change. So. Thank you, Adobe. Okay, so let me talk. We have a few minutes, and I can talk a little bit about my journey to food photography. So, as I referenced earlier, I'm an Italian from New York, and I was raised in an environment where there was a lot of food. So, and I learned how to cook really young. And then in college, my best friend was going to school at the School of Visual Arts, and I was going to school across the street at Baruch College. And I spent more time on his campus than I did in my own. And I was hanging out in studios, and I was learning photography, and I was the unfortunate model for a lot of the photography. Like, you need a human being here. You go stand over there.
Go stand there.
So I learned a lot. And I was an amateur photographer for many years, and then I was also an amateur chef. And hanging out cookies, hanging out in those circles, at one point an editor asked me, I know you can cook and I know you shoot. Do you want to shoot something for me?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll shoot something for you.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and I ended up on the beat shooting restaurants for the Times.
Oh, nice.
And then I started doing more studio work.
Okay.
It eventually phased out the restaurant beat,
Right.
and I became their primary food photographer. So that was the journey.
And that's kind of how these things happen a lot of times, right? You were just
Well, I was in the right place at the right time.
right.
And when I say the right time, I don't mean just the right time personally. I mean the right time in history.
Right.
Because digital photography offered people who were relative amateurs the opportunity to make pictures and develop pictures in ways
developed there.
Yeah,
right.
you couldn't do that if at my experience level at that point.
Right.
I would have needed a lot more seasoning.
What was your first digital camera?
It was a Nikon, and it was the Coolpix blah 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 with that thing that shit. I don't remember what the name of that
I
thing
know
was.
what you're talking about though. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first digital camera, and because I was shooting film Nikon cameras, and then I moved to Canon when.
Oh, so that's interesting. So you actually started on Nikon film cameras first.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is that the transition to the DSLR.
Right.
What they did it first.
Right.
Canon did it first, and I was shooting professionally at that point.
Right.
So I needed to make the switch, and the girl I had met and eventually became my wife had a battery of Canon lenses. So I was like,
That's a good connection to have right there.
and
Yeah.
If I could transition to Canon, I don't have to buy all the lensing.
First line on first date. You got any primes?
Got any primes, maybe?
Photo nerd.
Food styling tricks. Hold on, let me go back. How can we win 1 year?
Oh, that's right. Shall we do?
What are we winning?
We're gonna give away a Creative Cloud
Oh, cool.
membership. Maybe we do one more bit of processing on the whoopie pie, and we'll do that. We'll get Michael to queue up the software to do that. We have to think of a question as well.
I think we'll do it on this tight one.
Okay. Oh God, it's so good.
I want to see if we can fix up some of those little
So good.
things. Okay, so pull that up.
Oh. Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that we're working with all this kind of monochromatic food too.
Right.
We're not really working in anything that's very colorful.
No. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't go with the strawberry pound cake thing there.
No,
Yeah.
but even that, I mean, it's more brown
Still,
than anything.
it's more brown, right?
Okay, you want to ask the question?
Okay, so the question is, and we need you to answer this in the chat.
in the form of a
and-
question.
Right, yes, like Jeopardy. And our Nightbot will automatically pick you as a winner of 1 year of Creative Cloud. And if you already have Creative Cloud, it'll just add another 12 months to your subscription, and we will contact you via Twitter to let you know. The question is, what was the name of that 10-foot stand where Andrew was able to position the camera and shoot top down? What was the name of that special
You
stand?
can see it now.
Okay, oh yeah, there you go, all right.
And Nico,
Had a very specific name. We said it a bunch of times.
And it's not something you would know
It's not something you'd know unless you heard it,
unless
or
you'd heard it or you know it.
you know it.
So I'm playing a lot with the lights and the darks here, and the highlights and the shadows, because this is a black and white photo
Right.
in a way. There's very little tonality to it, so I'm trying to just kind of play with the light and the shadow enough to where I'm happy with both the exposure and the effect of that rippling, like it was dropped in a thing of milk, right? Because you can actually almost kind of sense that.
You're making me so hungry. Oh yeah, it's coming. So we will have a bot that will automatically choose the winner. But yes, you are correct.
Foba.
Foba.
F-O-B-A.
That's right.
But I like the P-H-O.
I don't. Well, we
I
made
like
that joke
too, because we made that joke.
We made that
yeah.
joke.
So that's actually, you get bonus points.
That's
for that.
legit too. We'll factor that in for Nightbot.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good. We got a lot of good listeners here. Everybody was paying attention now. Nice. So that's actually a great point that you just made, though, because this is kind of monochromatic. I mean, do you even enhance vibrance or saturation here, or do you?
I mean, I do it anyway, because I think there is still a measure of saturation to the darks and the lights.
Right.
I mean, it's not.
As opposed to just working with blacks or the shadows.
Yeah, I mean, they all pick up a different part of the image, you know. And where were we to get back into Photoshop?
Yeah. So right click.
I don't do right click
Okay.
very well. I'm very bad with my trackpad.
Okay. Oh wait, sorry, we're in the cursors over here.
There it is. I can never figure that one out. There it is. Okay.
So Kent is the winner.
Kent is the winner.
Hey, Kent. Good job.
All right, congratulations, Kent, William, Albin.
Yeah.
And please share with us your Twitter handles so we can contact you. Congratulations.
Very nice.
You just gotta be here to win, friends. Anton says, well
Be in it
done.
to win it. So here we are with this spot healing tool. Just kind of taking those little guys out. Just cleaning up some of this. This is kind of what I do. These little corrections.
Right.
They really help. I mean, they're almost go unnoticed at times, but when you, they can be a little distracting to the eye, and if you're not kind of mindful of it, all of a sudden you're not looking at the things that you want to look at.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So it's these are like little simple fixes, but also when
Yeah,
you
look
know
at how much that changed. That just
Yeah.
made that much more consistent, and
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be super perfect. It just has to be. Oh no, we don't like that. Command Z. But much better with the click. And this one's picking up some weird stuff there. Okay. Let's track around here. See, like this little indentation was where one of those little balls fell out.
Right.
And we could always fix those if you want.
And you could also clone a ball over there if you wanted, but that's
right. Well, that's not what I want to do right now,
right.
but I could. I could.
You could.
Believe me.
Right.
Okay. I don't mind the little holes. They're kind of cool looking. Like this guy, just take him right out. Goodbye.
And that's just because it's a distraction. It's kind
Exactly.
of yeah.
So these are the kind of little retouching kind of things that I would do, or I would instruct whoever was retouching for me to do.
It's food blemish removal.
Yeah, exactly. And but it's really about keeping that kind of consistency to what we're working on here.
Right. You're not cheating your audience in any
absolutely
way.
not.
Right.
Okay. So that makes a little bit of a difference. See, like right here, you see how that just kind of drew my eye?
Yep.
And just that little
Yep.
that little correction really helps.
Okay.
And then a little dent here.
Right.
And that's about it. You know,
Nice.
like play with it, and then we kind of got what we want out of that. And,
Delicious.
absence of a food stylist and a prop stylist, I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, man, it's fantastic.
Awesome.
Right, it's awesome. Right. All right, so we've got about 2 minutes. So again, Andrew, thank you so much. Day one, we did it.
We did it.
We did it.
We got through day one.
And we've got more coming up. Also want to remind you that, of course, you can watch the replays of these on the Creative Cloud YouTube channel immediately after we stop. So stay tuned. We are here for 3 days. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. And I don't know about
tomorrow, same time.
Right, and I don't know about you. I am so hungry, dude.
Yeah, I'm down with lunch.
It's because of Andrew.
Yeah, and now, of course, I'm not just gonna eat because now it has to look good before I even eat it at all.
Well, I'll help you. We style it.
All right, good. All right,
I'll talk a little bit about styling tomorrow too, because I know there were some questions there, and I saw Aisha wanted a little food styling tips. I could talk about that a little bit. I mean, we're not in a setting where it's technically kind of what we're doing, but I definitely will. If you have a specific question, happy to answer it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're so everyone's so grateful for this. Yeah. What time tomorrow? Same time, Anton.
Same time, 11 a.m.
11 a.m. Pacific time. And we are so grateful.
Of course, Aisha, no problem.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for being so vocal in the chat. And that's what this is all about, these Adobe Lives, is, sharing incredible work, incredible artists, tools, tips, techniques, the highs, the sometimes dark lows, and, and how we work around these things. And we are live. This is the first time we've ever done a live photo shoot like this, so, it's very exciting. And, Akash, will we eat the muffins now? Most likely, if Michael didn't already.
I think they're already gone.
I think
Michael already
I don't see the cookies anymore. Those are the first to go. You hid them. Oh, nice.
You hid the cookies? Who got the whoopie pie?
That's right. Who got the whoopie pie? Where is that? All right. We're in our countdown, our last couple of seconds here.
Let's say bye.
Okay. All right, everyone.
Next is Nicole.
So stick around.
Stick around for Nicole.
And we will see you again tomorrow, same time, same place, same channel. And thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you. And see you, Andrew.
See you. Thank you.